Today, we continue with our month-long innovation theme. This month, we tackle innovation more broadly to discuss innovation in business and organizations. Plus, we apply innovation in personal examples like putting on a wedding. Our aim is to make innovation real in your life. But first, my name is Jeff Hewlett. I'm a decision confidence builder. I'm a behavioral economist and have been in banking and financial services for most of my career. I'm a faculty member at James Madison University, and I lead Personal Finance Reimagined, or it's a decision-making and financial education platform. So today, I cannot be more excited to welcome Al Monserrat. In the dictionary, next to the word innovation is a picture of Al. So Al is truly a career technology and organizational innovator. Out of college, Al started in the technology arena, steadily progressing through several technology-focused companies, such as Accenture, Res Software, Nuance Communication, and ACI Worldwide. Al's work at Citrix included leading worldwide sales and service. But then Al took his innovation focus to the next level. Today, Al is an investor. Al deploys private capital, including the capital of Corten Capital, an investment firm. Past and present, Al has served on the board of many innovative companies, including Login VSI, Matrix 42, Itopia, Seacoast Bank, Momentum Consulting, HYCU, and Auxis. So Al, welcome, and I am just so glad that we can talk.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. I think innovation, the most important thing about innovation is that it's typically fun. And so that's why I enjoy it. And that's why I've always been intrigued by different ways in which you can innovate. There's also a couple myths that include the fact that it has to be complicated or it has to involve technology. It doesn't always have to involve technology. And so it's a great topic. It's a fun topic. And I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yes. Well, of course. And I thought if it's okay, Al, I just kind of start with just some maybe either a little background or a little like kind of table setting. So in my experience, if I asked 10 people the definition of innovation, I would likely get 10 different answers, and some of them being wildly different answers. So why don't we just start with a baseline question? What does innovation mean to you?
Sure. A more formal definition or an accepted definition, I guess, would be that it's making changes in something established, and usually it involves either a new method, a new idea, or a new product. And when you think about that definition, it immediately brings us to another piece of the topic, which is differentiating between creativity and innovation. That definition has two parts, and you could say that the introducing new methods, ideas, or products is creativity. So it's some kind of new method that you thought of, new idea that you had, or a new product that you thought of, and that requires creativity. But the first part is that it'll lead to making a change to something established. And I see that as more of the actual innovation part, because you can have creativity. Everybody is creative in some way. You can think about new ways to do things, apply fresh perspectives to old problems, and it can cut across many functions. Innovation is that applied creativity. So when you innovate, you take creativity and you turn it into something that is of value, that actually makes a sustainable change to something that's established.
It's funny. What I think of, and I'm not sure if this connects exactly to what you're saying, Al, but I think actually of Thomas Edison and the light bulb, and I think of. I've read a little bit about that. What I come to understand is at the time, the light bulb in the late 1800s was inevitable. Like all the pieces and parts of the creativity or the invention of the light bulb were basically there. That Thomas Edison's genius wasn't so much in the invention of the light bulb, but it was much more to do with how do you take all this and actually make it something that would be useful to the end consumer. And that was sort of some of his genius. I don't know, is that, yeah. I'm trying to connect the dots there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, the light bulb is one of those great innovations that solved a lot of problems. It opened up a lot of new doors. It changed people's lives. And later, when we talk about the types of innovation, it's also a type of innovation that now falls into different categories. Another one that always is fun to talk about and is the wheel. The light bulb, as many other innovations, originally came from things that existed in nature, and so light existed in nature, and that's how the light bulb came about. The idea, well, how can we have light when there's no natural light? The wheel I love because it's actually the first known innovation that did not come from nature. There are no wheels in nature. And it's also one of those innovations that has lasted a very long time. And today we think of wheel as transportation, but originally it was not invented for transportation. It was invented for, as a toy, as something to use to make pottery, as a pottery wheel. And then it moved on to transportation once people figured out that they could build roads and go from one place to another. But I think those are two really, really interesting ones, fun ones that have really, sustained their use over time and continue to go through evolutionary or incremental innovation over time.
Got it. Got it. So Al, when I look at your amazing background, and I like actually one thing you mentioned that really stuck out at me was the point is technology relates to innovation, can relate to innovation, but it's not, it's just part of innovation, I think, or it can be part of innovation. It doesn't always have to be part of it. But of course today often is. And so thinking about your background and some of the work that you've done, I'm just curious, just when you approach innovation and you're working, say, with one of your portfolio companies, is there a typical part of innovation that companies are more likely to struggle with versus parts of innovation that they're just more likely to get naturally or come to more naturally?
That's a good question. I would say that all innovation requires process, and that might seem a little bit counterintuitive because you tend to associate innovation with creativity and maybe free thinking, and it tends to be against process or formality, and so for innovation, whether it's an internal process or an external process, ultimately what's important is understanding the customer and what process really are you trying to solve or make easier. When you think a lot about the successful innovators we've had, it really has typically started more with the process. Where's the pain point? And really understanding how to improve the process. And oftentimes the first phase of innovation is improving the process. And that usually doesn't involve any technology. It just involves analyzing a process and understanding how it can be better applied, how it can be better done. And then, as a second phase, you can take technology and apply it to the process. I recall a project we did for a pharmaceutical company a long time ago where they were really struggling with how they were processing this customer data through a queue, and it was getting backed up, and it was life-threatening or life-saving. There were certain specific things you were looking at in the data, but the way they had the process laid out was not efficient in getting to the most important piece of information first.
Right.
And so what we actually did is we changed the process such that you could quickly identify the outliers that were at risk, fixed the process, and then after we fixed the process, we realized that there was technology we could apply to address more of the customers in the population of people that were using the process, and then applied the technology to make it as efficient as we could at the time. But usually it starts by process, and the more you focus on the process, the more likely you are to succeed.
Okay, well, let me kind of dig into that a little bit. You're using the word process, and it's funny because the way you used it there was a little bit different than I was initially thinking about it. So I'm thinking about there's almost like two processes. There's the process in need of innovation, or maybe the business process that's existing, providing some service, providing some benefit to whoever the outputs of that process are. But then there is the process of innovation that I would imagine people would naturally go through, the stakeholders, and that like somebody like you would sort of stand up as a way to lead people through a process that gets them to the point where they innovate their process. So I'm not sure, I'm not trying to confuse it, but could you kind of pull those apart a little bit for us?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The example I gave you is a process that we had already identified, a process that we knew, or yeah, a process that we knew needed help. And
Right.
so we first addressed the actual process that needed help. But in terms of innovation in companies, it's also important to have an innovation process defined to identify, either processes or activities like that one that we talked about, and try to innovate around them to improve them. And so, from a business perspective, you want to have a process because first, it provides you with a clear and orderly way to generate, evaluate, and implement new ideas. So you have top of mind for people that, hey, we want to innovate, we want to identify processes that can be improved. And that's where typically you pay more attention to the external ones than you do to the internal ones. So having a process that includes how can we work better together internally is important. Second, it leads to creating this culture of creativity and collaboration and learning that will motivate a team because they know that you want to know about ideas they have. It'll lead them to be more engaged around internal and external improvements and how you can perform better as an organization. Third, it's important because it aligns innovation efforts with corporate strategic goals and priorities, and you can monitor and measure, the outcomes and impacts of the innovation activities. If you just have random people coming up with ideas, you may not be aligning those ideas with what's important for the company, and therefore, not investing in the right things, or you may be spending a lot of time on things that are of interest to one person, but other people are not paying attention to. And then lastly, making sure that there's cross-functional coordination of innovation so that you're engaging any external partners, any customers,
Right.
any stakeholders, and getting everybody involved in driving that innovation, which was part of what we had to do in the example I gave you. So yeah, two
Right.
processes, one that should be ongoing in terms of identifying opportunities to innovate, and then secondly, understanding the process within the innovation first before trying to apply anything else.
Okay. No, that's great. So a couple questions actually come up with that. In one in particular. So eh, this is an extremely human process, and what I mean by that is when I think of other organizations, past organizations I've worked in, led, been part of innovation with before, especially in mature companies that have created cultures and processes that works for them and it works well, and it's sort of it's producing, and they're probably public companies, so they're at that point in the stage of their life cycle where they're beholden to the public markets. So my question is more around when I I've struggled sometimes with innovation, less about kind of coming up with the idea of what needs to be innovative, but really the people that are running the process. So if I ask the question, like why do you do this? I will often hear the answer, it's because we've always done it that way, right? And they literally don't seem to know the root cause for why they do something. And I've found, for at least in my experience, that kind of either attitude slash blind spot tends to be a real challenge when it comes to not just identifying the challenge, maybe that's not the hard part, but actually getting people on board and kind of almost like um, uh, being okay with taking something that they've invested so much into, and now taking it and potentially changing it, and all the fear that goes with that, right? Like, oh my God, I'm not going to be the I built my whole career around being really good at this, and that this guy just came here and told me actually we need to do it a different way, right? So it could be perceived as threatening and all that stuff. So I don't know. And that's again from my perspective. I've seen things like that before. I'm just curious though. Is that something that you run into in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple different things, or a few different things come to mind. The first one is that selling innovation is the same as selling anything. I mean, you have to
Right.
lead with the value proposition, and you have to understand who your customer is for selling the innovation, the process of innovation. So actually driving innovation, not the actual innovation, but the process of innovation.
Right.
And you have to sell that as much as you would have to sell any product, any other product. And so understanding what some of those objections might be, and being able to communicate what the benefits, of innovation would be as well. to some of those people. Oftentimes, in tech in particular, you run into situations where people are used to building something in a certain way, and that's how they've always done it, or in a certain language, and that's how they've always done it. And so,
Right.
leading the benefit of the new things you'll be able to do, the
Right.
more fun you'll have, the learning opportunity, leading with that, I think really helps change the mindset. And then another key component for me, because innovation, we talked about the difference between creativity and innovation, and you can't have innovation without creativity. And oftentimes it's the most creative people that lead to uncovering innovation. But just like with everything else, the more diversity you have in a team, the more you tend to get things to work properly. And so I've found that when it comes to innovation, it's always good to have very creative people, but also very good to have people that will make sure you follow the innovation process so that you can get the most value and the most benefit from those creative people, and end up with something that is replicable, that is sustainable, that is of value. And so making sure that as part of your process, as part of how you work through the company with innovation, that you have diversity in terms of the mindset and the process that people follow. And, like any diverse team, that there's respect for the different contributions that people bring and people's roles within the innovation.
So I'm curious. And actually, one thing you just said to the spirit, I was kind of laughing in my head here for a second. So one of my first jobs when I got out of grad school, so we're talking about in the 90s, I worked for Citibank, and I was a behavioral economist for them, and so very, very data intensive. And I can remember at the time they had big mainframes, and they use all the programming was done in COBOL. We were doing different stuff, but for the core system mainframe, think of very old school mainframe COBOL. And so I was working for IBM a few years ago, and then we had an engagement with Citibank. So it was kind of nice to be back, right? And so I was very much in that. Okay, it's been 25 years. How much has changed? I'm talking to this person who'd been there for a while, and I asked the question. So tell me something. Do they still code in COBOL here? And she looked at me. She said, "You're not going to believe this, but yes, we still code in COBOL." So anyway, I don't know how widespread that is, but it was after 25 years. I thought COBOL was gone, and well, no, it's still going, apparently, at least in Citi. So anyway, and I'm sure there's very good reasons for that. I don't want to take anything away from Citibank. They're a very successful global financial services company, but yeah, I think old habits die hard sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the things that you had talked a little bit about, so we've got process, the process, target process, we've got the process of innovation that sort of sits on top of that. And then you talked about sort of almost like a third layer almost, which is in terms of leadership and performance and kind of being real clear about what you want to get out of this, and then having some interaction to make sure that as you're going through a process, you have touch points to make sure that what we want to get out of it is what we're actually getting out of it, or at least we're in process of the milestones that we will get out of it, what we want to get out of it. So I was just curious in terms of that third layer, working with leadership and getting folks on board and just clearly defining that. How does that work, and is that tend to be challenging, not so challenging?
Yeah, I think every situation is going to be a little bit different, but ultimately you do have to understand what's the value going to be, whether it's a financial value or a non-financial value. But there has to be something in it, for somebody outside of the person solving the problem or driving the innovation, for you to be able to achieve, what is the ultimate step of successful innovation, which is for the innovation to be sustainable, for the innovation to live on. There's a lot of innovation that's out there, creativity that perhaps gets into some stage of innovation, but then is not sustainable. So the value needs to be there, and typically the best way to identify that value is by quickly moving into where you're developing prototypes and prototyping it with the people that you believe are going to be the ones that are going to see the most value in your solution, whether it's an idea, a method, a process, or an actual product. But that's, to me, that's a key part of innovation, is how quickly can you move to prototyping? How quickly can you move to getting feedback from the audience that's going to benefit from the innovation, or in some cases, multiple audiences benefiting from the innovation. And then the more positive feedback you get from all the different audiences, the quicker and the smoother you can get an innovation to market. You and I exchanged emails on Spotify, for example, which is for me, I love Spotify, and I love Spotify because I've always loved music,
100%.
and being able to have all the music in the palm of your hand, is a huge benefit for me and a huge part of my life. If you watch the Spotify documentary or you read about the history of Spotify, the reason why it took a while for Spotify to get out and really be accepted and really be sustainable was the fact that not all the audiences, not all the customers of music were happy with Spotify, in particular the artists and the recording companies, and they have a lot of control over the process. But in the end, the customer benefit, the benefit to you, to me, was so great that eventually it did make it to where it is today, but not without a lot of hurdles. You compare that to another one of my favorite, innovations, which is pay at the pump. And that's a benefit, that's an innovation that quickly became sustainable because it really helped everybody in the process. It was easier for the customer to pay at the pump. You didn't have to go inside and wait time. It was easier for the gasoline owner, to make that available and not have to deal with a bunch of people on staff and the risk of the transactions. It was great for the financial institutions. And so that one, it's really difficult to figure out who was it painful for. And that one was one that was adopted really quickly. So, understanding all the people that stand to benefit or not from the innovation, and making sure that you have a value proposition for as many of them as possible is key to deploying innovation.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned pay at the pump. Where my head always went to is, yes, it's incredibly convenient. And my only wonder was always, I always assumed that one of the benefits if you own a gas station is selling all the other stuff inside the gas station. So now being able to go up, get your gas, and leave without having to parade in front of all the chewy treats. I don't know if that made chewy treat sales go down, but that's an interesting one anyway.
It's a great point. And on that one, I just saw that Wawas have installed Tesla chargers, electric car chargers, because you have to wait longer for
you got to wait. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so that's so it's the continuation of innovation. First put the screens on the pump so that to entice you to come in and get a coffee or something. But I think that's genius, putting the chargers there, and benefiting from all the things they can sell inside.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think back to Spotify, and not that I came up with this idea, but I can just remember like listening to XM and Sirius and all that, being, this is like really interesting. But why can't I manage my own playlist? Why do I have to tell XM and Sirius which channel I want to listen to? And I'm still not sure if I'm going to get the music I like. Why can't I give it a playlist, or why can't it learn from my past, listening behaviors to come up with songs that I'm more likely to like? And then a year later, Spotify shows up. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I wasn't the own person that thought that the XM Siri model, while very interesting, felt like a stepping stone to where we are today.
And going back to process, I don't want to turn this into a Spotify commercial, the whole interview, but when you think about, like, when I grew up outside of the U.S. and I always loved music, and so going back to the process, for me to be able to acquire and listen to a song I liked as frequently as I wanted to, required a record company somewhere to decide that was a record they wanted to sell in a foreign country, and that was not an easy thing for them to do and make the investment when you weren't going to sell the volume you needed to sell to pay for the production. And so for me, the process of listening to a song I liked oftentimes involved sitting next to the radio 24 hours and making sure that I was within 1 second of hitting the record button, on that cassette player, to record the song I then wanted to hear whenever I wanted to hear. And so it goes back to it was a painful process. And then eventually, over the course of time, it just became easier to solve the process with technology.
Yep. Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's yeah, no, so I'm with you. I think Spotify is kind of funny how that's just become such a natural part of my life. And it is interesting how it has absolutely changed the the industry in terms of how money's made. And of course, now to go to a live event's much more expensive because I guess the revenue sources were coming from listening to music and getting LPs and all that stuff. So, but people have voted with their feet clearly, and that's what I love about innovation, because to me, what I feel like people, I think there's groups of people that will be like purists, like, hey, listening to music on vinyl or listening to music in certain ways is a pure way of listening to music. But when I think about the innovation process, to me, it's almost like a series of votes where basically people said, "Look, this is how I, meaning in general across the population, enjoy music, and here's a better way," right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and of course, people that want to listen to vinyl can still listen to vinyl if they want to.
That's what I was going to say. Is innovation. What innovation gives you is choice. If I were to flip this camera around, you would see vinyl, you would see CDs, many of them brand new, and of course I've got Spotify in the palm of my hand, and so I love all three, and what I buy in each format varies depending on characteristics that maybe we can do another podcast around. But the point is, innovation is choice. Innovation gives you choice.
Right.
You can still go inside the pump and pay if you want.
Right.
It gives you the choice of what you want to do, and that's what I think is beautiful about innovation. Is it's absolutely just choice.
Right. So I thought maybe if it's okay, Al, and you tell me if it's not, of course, but I thought we could wrap up this discussion with a little bit more of a personal discussion. And so you and I have talked a little bit about your dad and growing up outside of the United States, and the story of your father is amazing, and what he went through with the Spanish Revolution and things like that. So what my curiosity is more, do you relate to how you grew up and how you came to the United States and your family? Does that relate in a way to like how you think about innovation? Like, do you feel like there's a part of you and how you grew up that kind of almost spurred you to become more likely to be an innovator? Or I don't know. I'm just super curious about that, because your background to me it's inspiring. It's a great message, and then I'm trying to connect the dots. But you're an amazing innovator too. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I hadn't thought about that one because we didn't talk about that. But there's a lot of first of all, I think my journey has been incredibly easy, and I'm blessed for how easy it's been for a variety of reasons, including some of the upbringing and having to move every 2 or 3 years, and the people I've been surrounded with from a family and mentor perspective. I've just had, I always say that success comes from good friends, good mentors, and being in the right place at the right time, and that's pretty much my life's story. And so, are there things that have shaped, what I eventually became? Absolutely. I would say that my dad was very creative. When he first had to leave Spain because of the Civil War there, and came to the Americas. I know that with his uncle, who was very entrepreneurial and creative as well, one of the first things that they formulated, manufactured, in a bathtub, and packaged and sold was a hair dye. And they realized a few days after selling the hair dye, when it began to rain, that it would completely, like, dilute. And so people came back to complain about the hair dye, and they just changed the labels on the packages from hair dye to shoe polish, and they began to sell it, as shoe polish. So
That's innovation, right?
that's
That is
yeah. So that was
truly innovation.
yeah. So that one was innovation, and then he had other things. One time we had an accident with our dog, and the dog became disabled from the waist down, and he took a little toy, doll car for my sister, and turned it into a wheelchair for the dog. And and he could have marketed that, but very small market, very niche market, and I'm sure that you can get those now at medical stores. But that was another thing. It made the newspaper, back in Costa Rica because it was something different and fun that somebody had done. And the dog lived for many years after that, carrying this thing around. From a work perspective, he worked at Merck Pharmaceutical, and so I was always very intrigued and interested by that innovation and the things that Merck did around healthcare and pharma. So definitely, grew up in that kind of environment with a lot of creativity and innovation around, and that certainly, drove my continued interest and desire to be part of, teams that were innovating. So definitely a lot there, but he's the one that, he's the one that broke ground. He's the one that did the challenging things, coming here and twice having to leave, his place where he was living because of different revolutions. So yeah, so for me it was easy, but certainly a lot of the upbringing just instilled this desire to question things and innovate and drive change.
Right, right. Well, that's amazing. And of course, now you've got your 20-somethings coming along behind you. So
Yeah, they
we'll
can
get
be
to
very
find out.
creative too. They can be
Right,
very creative
right.
too.
Yeah, it's a family business, this innovation. So, well, Al, I want to thank you so very much. It's been a fabulous discussion. I know I've learned a lot, and I know the viewers have learned a lot as well. So thank you, and we will, I'll hope to have you back again another time.
Thank you, Jeff. Hope to see you and your family again sometime soon.
All right, thank you, sir.
Take care.